right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Happy Friday in crazy times that we're in, but there's so many pieces of good news that we can focus on as we look towards a lot of businesses getting the okay to reopen in retail, and perhaps in the next couple of weeks, even a more expansive opening of our businesses. But before we get to all of that, let's take a minute here today to just focus on not only the well-being as we do with our Chamber for the wellness of our businesses and our finances, but let's think about us as people here for just a moment, and our mental and our physical health and how important that it is. I was reading some statistics that nearly half of adults, 45% in the United States, have reported that their mental health has been negatively impacted during the COVID crisis, and 57% of Americans have said that this has severely impacted their routines. And I don't know about you, but whenever my routine is messed up, I'm messed up too. So I know that I have a pencil and pen ready to take down some of the really great tips and tricks of our panelists today, which we're so blessed to have in our community. So on behalf of the Chamber, we're happy to bring this to you today, in addition to the other programming, again, that focuses on your business and community. Our two panelists today are Dr. Rachel Ward. She is a psychologist here in our community on Hilton Head. And we also have Michelle Casey. Michelle is she is the board chairwoman of NAMI Lowcountry. And again, we're just thrilled that they could be here to be able to share just some guidance for us, just to live better, live happier, live healthier. So without further ado, Rachel, thank you again so much for being here, and take it away.
Thank you, Hannah, and good morning, everyone. I hope you're doing well. I'm going to share my screen with you. Hold on just a minute. And so as we go through this, I'm going to put some slides up. They asked me to speak for about 15 or 20 minutes. And so I'm going to have these slides so that we can get through a lot of information fairly quickly, and hopefully it'll be easy to follow. So I called this mental health trends because I know we have individuals on this, business owners, people who care for people who are ill. So what I wanted to do was give you a general idea of what I'm kind of seeing quickly trend through my office and my practice, and how we can kind of understand those trends for this very specific issue that we're dealing with. And so let me look, here's number one. I think we need to understand that this COVID-19 is a very unusual set of circumstances, very unlike what we've seen before. It's global, and so there's a sense people have there's nowhere to escape it, and that's very different than what people usually face when they face a personal stressor. A huge additional stressor is that we have instant and endless global information. So something's going on in China, we kind of know it right away, but we're looking at a global picture. And the truth is the human brain isn't really set up to absorb and deal with that much information. As one person said, you can point a fire hose towards a sponge, but a sponge can only absorb so much water. And so the global nature of this, the constant and unending information, is another stressor that's just new in the history of the whole world. COVID-19 also has multiple unknowns. When is this going to end? Will it come back? What are my finances going to be? How is this going to impact my family? What age group is most impacted by it? And so that's just a whole nother set of stressors. There's no end date to this. We can't say, hey, in July, this will be over. And interestingly, it comes after multiple years of upheaval in North America. So if you really think for about the last 6 or 7 years, with the internet, iPhones, political unrest, we've really gone through about a 5 to 7 year period where people have already felt agitated, about politics and economics. And so at the end, now we have come to something where we weren't really coming very united and calm as a culture. We were already in upheaval. Then one of the most interesting things to me about this whole COVID crisis is typically when we have a trauma or a difficulty in our life, we have it as an individual or a family, but the rest of our culture and environment goes on as it normally has. And there's some kind of solidity in that. Like we can kind of go, well, this is horrible in my life, but the grocery store is still open. What has happened with COVID-19 is it's flip-flopped that whole thing, where our environment is out of sync, and we as individuals have to find a way to kind of cope with that. And so these are just really important things to look at when you look at how people are struggling with COVID-19. Secondly, I see two very different and general reactions. Now, of course, there's many more than this, but these are kind of the two basic avenues people are going down. The first group of people are just afraid of the virus, right? They're afraid of getting sick. They're afraid of catching it. They're afraid of getting someone else sick. So their whole kind of goal in this is, how do I get away from the virus? So they're going to have very specific routines, very specific concerns. Then there's the second group of people who fear the future. What about my job? What about finances? How is this going to impact politics? How long am I going to have to be isolated? So if you look at those two different groups, they're going to have very different goals and very different concerns. And I think if you read the Island Packet, or you read the Next Door Neighbor, or neighbor to neighbor email group, you see these two groups here just on our island kind of clashing with each other. And so when you're helping someone or thinking of your own problem, you have to kind of decide which one of these two groups are you talking to, because they're going to have very different concerns and very different kind of goals that they go after. Next, let's look at the pure mental health challenges that COVID-19 specifically tends to increase or target. Number one, because we're in the early ranges of this, is going to be anxiety. That's going to be the number one mental health issue you're going to see. People think anxiety, is worry or shaking. Worry certainly is there, but some other very common anxiety symptoms, and especially if you're an employer or a parent, you're going to see these in your children or in your employees or even in your friends and coworkers. Worry is, of course, number one, but also distraction. They're going to be, people are getting very bad at just focusing. I've had many, many people come into my office and just say, yeah, I just can't get that done, or I just can't get my house cleaned. You're going to have poor sleep. People are going to have much more sleep disturbances, tearfulness, irritability, where they just can't handle things as well as they could before. They'll say, like, I'm in a terrible mood and I don't know why. Interestingly, people, when they're anxious, become less flexible. So it's harder for them to make a decision. It's harder for them to negotiate. It's harder for them to put up with bad drivers, with little things going wrong, because they just don't have as many resources because they're being eaten up by anxiety. Especially in this COVID-19 situation, you're going to see people who are more obsessive about things. So, you have to have a mask, hand washing. Those are all things we should be doing. But there are going to be people who almost become obsessive about thinking, if I do this, I'll protect myself. And that's definitely a big part of anxiety. And then lastly is just pure frustration. People's tempers are going to get shorter. What a good way to think of anxiety is, we all get up in the morning and have like a certain gas tank of mental energy and emotional energy. And we spend that every day. And the only way we can refill it is to go to sleep and fill it back up. If you're anxious, part of that gas tank is already being used up just by being anxious. So you have to get dressed anxious. You have to go to the grocery store anxious. I'm sure many of us have thought, it's so much different to go to the grocery store now than 2 months ago. We just went in, didn't even think about it. Now you have to think, do I need gloves? Do I need a mask? And so you're definitely going to have much higher anxiety. Secondly, in general areas is what I call the double down factor. So when you are dealing with COVID-19 and your anxiety about it, during this era in history, these last few months, any mental health or personal issue you have, you just have to think, this is probably twice as bad for me now. So if you have depression, you're probably struggling with it much more. Grief, people are, we have people who are losing family members. How do you deal with that grief when you can't have a public funeral, when you can't see your friends? Things like obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, is going to get worse because you're going to have more stress that you're dealing with. Marital conflicts, we know, are getting worse. Parenting issues. One of the big concerns, even the CDC and World Health Organization have talked about, is substance abuse. So a lot of people are dealing with this by drinking, especially, alcohol sales have gone through the roof. And so substance abuse, pot smoking, things like that are getting much worse. Then when you look at those two starred ones on the bottom, for people who have family members with very serious mental health concerns like bipolar disorder or reality disorders. And by that, I mean maybe people, who have dealt with hallucinations and things like that. This is going to put a lot of pressure on their systems. So people with bipolar disorders and reality disorders tend to have a looser tie to reality, like their reality can get shaken up much more. So something like COVID-19 and all the information coming at us, all the conspiracy theories, all the worry, those people need special care just to normalize their days. So that's a very, it's a smaller group, but it's a very significant group of keeping a schedule, checking in on them, encouraging them to stay off media is very important. And then thirdly, it's very important in mental health issues. One of the things that I think we all do to some degree is we think when there's a tragedy, people will become better. They'll be more generous and more wonderful. What research really shows is that when there's a tragedy or a hardship, people tend to become superhero versions of themselves. So if you're generous, you become super generous. If you're angry, you become super angry. If you're anxious, you become super anxious. So when thinking about yourself or family members that you're struggling with or coworkers, it's really good to think, okay, were they like this before? And is this just an exaggerated version of who they are because of the pressure of the situation? So those are kind of the mental health challenges. Right now, you're going to see the most is going to be anxiety because we're in the early stages of this. Other mental health issues can roll out from this in the future, but those are the ones you will see in your environment the most. Here are what I would assume and what I'm hearing from people come through my office are the biggest workplace issues. And that is poor communication. Even with Zoom meetings and emails and texts, it's very different than communicating in a meeting and sitting there and saying, okay, everybody has this and reinforcing it. So workplace issues are going to be people are not communicating as well. They're not tracking information as well. There's going to be a lot more, I thought we said this, lower task completion. I'm hearing this across the board from workers, from management, is that people are just tending to get less done and how frustrating that is just within the workplace. Another huge workplace issue is there are increased rumors and gossip. And so what I mean by this is, people saying, oh, I heard this is going to happen. I heard we're going to get furloughed then. I hear she's not doing this. So it's gossip and rumors about the larger COVID situation, and then it's gossip and rumors about your workplace. Another big workplace issue during all this is bitterness between employees. Who gets to work from home? Who has to go into the office? Why is he only having to work 20 hours a week when I'm putting out 40 hours a week? So there's a lot of quiet bitterness that builds up between employees in high stress situations. And then another big workplace issue versus during COVID-19 is irritability to and from the public. So if you have a job where you work with the public, employees tend to be more irritable, to the public. They're not as good at dealing with situations that they answer phones. People get them more irritated because they're already irritated. And then the public is more difficult to deal with. I was talking to somebody who is still working at Starbucks the other day, and they said that, a person drove up into the drive-thru and said, what are you guys doing in Starbucks to protect me from this disease while you make my order? And so they're becoming more demanding, they're asking more questions just because everybody's more irritable and under pressure. Then these are relationship issues that I think you will see in your relationships and in your families. And some of these are just really key to not letting things get bigger and explode. The first thing is that people are going to have differing views on this crisis. I mean, even this week, this far into this crisis, I have people who still don't believe it's true, who think that people are overreacting. I have other people I've seen who have been locked in their houses for a month. And so even within your family, within your workplace, people are going to have differing views on how important this crisis is and how you should respond to it day by day. I just read someone online that I know from in another state who absolutely went to a doctor's appointment and thought it was ridiculous that they were asking her to wear a mask in the doctor's appointment. You know, and you can just imagine the comments that came back by this. So if you are living with your husband or wife and you have very different perspectives on it, you really have to talk that out and come to some kind of common understanding. Then there's also going to be different focuses of importance. Where you're really going to see this is if someone in a family or a company or whatever is out still working and what they have to do with the public or at their job, and the other person is at home working or with the kids. You know, so they're going to tend to have very different focuses of what's important and how they're going to spend their time. In businesses, you're going to have different focuses. You're going to have some people that are like, hey, the bottom line and how we're going to keep this company going long term is going to be their focus. You're going to have other people that say, hey, right now, empathy for these people or listening to their problems is what I think should be the focus. So in relationships, whether it's a company relationship or a family, you really have to talk through those things. People have what I call different emotional languages. So some people grew up in families that when pressure got on, everybody yelled. Some people grew in families when the pressure got on, you sat and discussed and problem solved. Some people grew up in families that when the pressure was on, everybody went silent. And depending on how you grew up, that tends to be your norm. So if say you're in a marriage where somebody grew up in a yelling family and someone grew up in a silent treatment family, this is going to be a time when those differences are going to become super noticeable. So you have to know, you have to say like, what is it, you know, when you yell, are you really mad or are you just venting? So knowing the different emotional languages is important. And then of course, there's already been jokes and, you know, memes about this. Introverts versus extroverts on this COVID-19 lockdown is a big deal. Introverts are a lot of introverts are going, well, there's a lot of pressure, but I kind of like, this is my life, right? I like to be at home. I like to read books. I like to garden. And extroverts are really struggling. They want to be with their friends. They want to be able to talk to people about this. They want to be able to go out to dinner. So interestingly, very quickly after this all came down, I started to hear extroverted people really struggling with what do I do with my time and how do I cope with this if I don't have my friends with me? All right, so here are some best practices. So whether this is for your family, yourself as an individual, or as a company, here are some basic things you can start doing to just help people deal with this. The first is a plan. So I think you can have a plan for the day, a plan for your week, and then a plan for the month. Like what basically are we going to accomplish today? What's our plan today? Even if it is, hey, the whole family is going to stay in their pajamas and watch movies all day. As long as everybody knows that's acceptable and that's the structure of the day, a plan helps people with uncertainty. The thing that's really driving people over the edge right now is the whole uncertainty that we just don't know much. Secondly, again, family, marriages, relationships, businesses, clear expectations. So if your employees are at home, what are you expecting them to do every day? List it out, print it out. If your kids are at home, what are you expecting them to do every day? That's a kindness to give them everyone clear expectations that we can just check it off and I don't have to guess what my boss is thinking. They can just tell me. Let everyone know what the decision-making structure is. If I'm an at-home employee, who do I report to? If I have a problem, who do I call? Who's deciding if I'm doing enough or not? And so make the decision-making structure very clear. Honesty is important. If you know you're going to furlough employees in 5 days, don't lie to them about it, or don't mislead them like, no, I don't think that's going to happen. Or if, if the kids are asking you, is this going to be over next week? Don't say, yeah, probably. Just say, you know what, we don't know yet. And honesty becomes super important in a crisis. Then I would say, especially in business, you want to give people empathy, but not therapy. bosses cannot, and management and coworkers and secretaries and support staff cannot be the therapist for their other coworkers. And right now, everybody kind of wants to dump on each other because they're overwhelmed. So you want to give them empathy and say, how are you doing? That is hard, but you do not want to try to be a therapist for them. Lastly, for best practices is you want to have managed emotions, right? You don't want to be yelling all the time. You don't want to take your frustration out on other people. You want to be able to express your emotions, but also realize everybody's on the edge right now, so you're going to tend to go too far. So you want to have managed emotions. Then lastly, here's just a checklist of don'ts and do's to keep it easy. Number one, don't ignore this situation. It's huge, it's unprecedented, it's global. We've never really lived through something exactly like this. Everybody feels the pressure. So don't ignore it and just act like we can just go on. Instead, ask check-in questions. Again, you don't want to be a therapist, but you might want to just say, how are you doing? Are you getting enough sleep? Do you feel like you're making it pretty well every day? So you can have check-in questions for your family, for kids, you know, for your neighbor if you see them, for coworkers. Secondly, don't act on your emotions. So don't act, if you're angry, don't act on that. If you are anxious, don't act on that. Instead, make informed decisions. Gather information, register how you're feeling. Like you can say like, yeah, I'm over the edge right now, so I know I'm not going to make a good decision. But make informed decisions. You know, super interesting. Research shows that in the big 2008 downturn, the companies who did not do well in the long term were on two extremes. They were the people who laid off their people immediately, or the businesses that never made any changes. So they were both emotional reactions, right? Like knee jerk, I'm just going to lay everybody off. Or on the other end, like almost paralyzed because I'm scared to do anything. It was the people in the middle, the businesses in the middle, that made well-informed decisions that actually survived that downturn. Thirdly, don't smoke and drink excessively. And really, this is the substance abuse thing. Don't use substances to make yourself feel better. Do sleep. You need to have good sleep. Don't overeat, which we're all doing, but it's easy to go for comfort food. Anxiety actually physically makes us want to eat more, but instead sleep and exercise daily. Even if you're just walking around your living room for 20 minutes, absolutely do that. Don't sleep with screens in your bedroom. So don't sleep with your cell phone next to you. Don't sleep with your iPad, your laptop, your TV on. Any blue light disturbs your sleep. Even that little tiny battery light on your laptop, if it's in your room, can disturb your sleep. Do take regular media breaks. So if you're going to be on media for 2 hours, make yourself take an hour-long break. It is just running our lives. Lastly, don't catastrophize. We do not know the future. And what people tend to do is take the future and run with it and make it into a catastrophe. And so we do not want to catastrophize. Instead, you want to discipline yourself to identify what's good today. You can definitely say, this is hard, here's what I'm struggling with, and then force yourself to say, but what's still good today? All right, I hope that was helpful. And I will hand it back over to Hannah.
All right, Rachel, thank you so much. I've been taking notes. We're going to come back to some questions, and there's also, there should be a chat box that's open on your screen somewhere. So if anybody has any questions and you want to put that into the chat, we're going to take as many of those as we possibly can. I want to turn things over now to Michelle Casey with NAMI Low Country. And Michelle, I know that this is what NAMI does day in, day out, is to talk to folks in our community, put together great group programming. So tell us more about that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. And I just want to build on what Dr. Ward said. She gave us some great information on how to handle things in an abnormal situation. And, we all have our experiences that we bring to any situation in any environment. And what NAMI is focusing on is helping those people who struggle with a mental condition on all levels. It can be just an anxiety that's situational, or depression that's situational. It's still anxiety and depression. The symptoms are the same. It's not, the cause is not necessarily relevant when it comes to NAMI. We want to be there to help. We do have people, and we are used at NAMI to living in a constant state of uncertainty and crisis. And we have programs available for that. And so I'd like to really share my screen now, if you'll just give me a second while I set that up, to just share with you who we are and what we do. Let me just do this for 1 second and we'll get this going. Okay. So there. So my name is Michelle Casey, and I am the president of the board of directors of NAMI Low Country. NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and and I'm going to explain this for those who don't know who we are, because we are sort of obscure in this world of charities and organizations. NAMI is the National Alliance of Mental Illness, and we're NAMI Low Country. So this is your local affiliate, your local area that has all the resources. This is a volunteer community, a volunteer organization. It's grassroots. We only have 2 paid employees in our entire organization. We offer 13 programs, including Spanish speaking. I'd like to introduce our board of directors. This picture was taken at our gala event, which is a huge fundraising event that we do every February. Please put it on your calendars. But let me introduce the board of directors. And I'm doing this because there are 2 Michelles on the board of directors, and the lovely tall blonde lady in the middle of this picture, that is Michelle Taylor. I am standing next to her in the green. We also have Felicia Vaccaro, who is on the other one dressed in green, and the one next to her, the other redhead, that is Sarah Eliasoff. She is our executive director, and she has done great things with our organization. She's been with us around a decade now and has worked tirelessly to build our presence here, and she's also on the call today. We also have people not pictured here on the board. Lori Shea is also a member who heads up a lot of our groups. And we look like we're a big organization, but let me tell you folks, we're 100 members serving 5 counties. The 5 counties that we serve are Beaufort, Jasper, Hampton, Colleton, and Allendale. There's 100 members active in NAMI, and there's about 20 of us who are serving all those areas. So forgive me if I just really ask for the opportunities for you guys to get involved with this organization, because we have a growing need, and this COVID crisis has only accelerated that. So let's get straight to just 2 of the programs, because we're having to adapt now that people aren't exactly able to attend meetings. We're focusing right now on 2 main programs via Zoom. One is our family support. It's via Zoom. We'll be doing this every 5 o'clock in the evenings and 10 o'clock in the mornings, and we'll be doing them every 2nd and 4th Thursday and every 4th Tuesday starting in May. So who should come to these meetings? Anyone that needs to have some support, because they need that objective outlet to where maybe you can't talk to your coworkers, maybe you can't talk to your family members, maybe you need a neutral place to go. So this is sort of like the Al-Anon for people who are having living with people who have a mental condition and need that family support. Our next group is the Connection group. Think of this as an AA meeting for people. It's the AA for Mental Health. It's our local chapter. These meetings started on April 22nd of this week via Zoom, 7 o'clock in the evenings. The information is here, and you don't have to worry about taking notes, because I'm going to email this presentation to the chamber, and they can distribute it however they see fit. I just want you to know that we have these available for you. You do have to register. And one very, very important thing is this is all confidential. When you enter these Zooms, this is confidential, and we protect that environment for people to share what they need to share in order to help move them forward in their journey. Supposing you need help right now, let me just move this out of the way. Supposing you need help right now, well, we have a crisis hotline, and you can also text to this hotline, and people will respond to you very quickly with that. usually within 24 hours. Another thing that we are doing is our Southern Swear campaign. The objective of this is to break the stigma for mental health. People are quite willing to talk about diabetes, cancer, any other thing, but unfortunately, mental health has a stigma. And so if somebody's dealing with bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or has some sort of brain illness, it's not looked at as maybe a problem with the, in the same way that kidneys are not functioning right. It's all one body, guys. And so this is something that we're doing to break the stigma of mental illness. And I think that even though nothing is all good or all bad, and this COVID crisis, as difficult as it is really helpful that we now are getting the recognition and presence in this time to help people, and that people are recognizing it's much more common, and it's we want to normalize the conversation with mental health. So we're very grateful to have that opportunity to help more people. So if you want to help us and help raise the awareness, please go to our NAMI website and join the Southern Swear campaign. There's more information on there. So NAMIlowcountry.org. Like I said, I'll be sending this information out there. One of the things that we do is also the NAMI walks. We'll be doing that November 7th this year. And I think it's November 7th. I know that I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, but it's where we do our other fundraiser to raise awareness. This isn't just about raising money, folks. This is about raising awareness that NAMI is here. NAMI Low Country was the affiliate in the nation in 2012, and we've been here to support you. And here's what we're struggling with ourselves, is that not enough people know about the resources that we have, which, by the way, are all free. And also we need volunteers to help facilitate those programs. The need is bigger than our Army right now. So if you're at home and you're wanting to connect and you want to do something to help people, this is a great way to find that support and offer that support. So some of the things that we recommend while you're going through this time is to understand that social distance does not mean social isolation, to put the routine and structure in your day in the same way that you would have had your working hours, make those your productive hours. I love what Dr. Ward said, use devices and watch your media use. I recommend as much as possible use your devices for activities, just like we're doing this Zoom call. We were talking yesterday, I heard in some reports that sunshine is maybe going to be a big contributor for killing the COVID virus. So just one more reason to get out in sunshine whenever possible. And then also during this time, find some time to connect to creativity. Do things that make you feel good, whether it's baking a cake or learning to cook a new dish, or it's reorganizing your closet, or it's just doing something different in the backyard. And talking of backyard, another thing to do is to connect with nature and pets, maybe plant something. I am always guilty of having a death row for plants, but I am endeavoring to change, and I'm going to develop a green thumb during this time. So that's pretty much all I have to offer with what we do with NAMI. I'm open for any questions. We are happy to be here to offer whatever you need in the workplace and at home. We've always been here, and we just want to let you know that we are specifically here. And even if you can't attend a meeting in person, you can do it through Zoom. Back to you, Hannah.
Thank you, Michelle, so much. Dr. Ward, if I could pose a question at you here really fast. I've heard you speak on this before. The physiological responses to anxiety and how our bodies were created to have this fight or flight. You know, whether it's, you know, you go back through the paper product section of your grocery store and they still don't have any paper products, or whether, you know, your boss is driving you crazy, we're feeling perhaps now more than ever, or exaggerated, this anxiety where our minds just start turning, and there's no outlet for it many times. Talk us through what our mind is doing, what's happening in our brain, and then some of those tips that you have, like counting backwards, those kinds of things that can help temper the situation.
Absolutely. So what Hannah's kind of talking about is this idea that our body was really made with two systems, a sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. And so the first one was really made that when we saw something dangerous, you know, a bear, an alligator, our body gets itself ready to protect us. So it is your blood pumps faster, you breathe more shallowly so you can run faster, your stomach stops digesting food, your eyes constrict so you can see better. And that's a really good thing if you're running away from an alligator. And then the other system of your body would slowly shut that down and bring you back to normal. What happens in a situation like this, and especially with things like it's a global scale, we don't know the end to it, social media in our minds all the time, is that that first system never goes back to normal. So our blood's always pumping too fast. We're always getting too much adrenaline. You know, our stomach isn't digesting food as well. And so I'm sure most of us have felt that in the last month. I've heard more people say, I have chest pains, I have headaches, you know, I feel on edge all the time. I feel like I'm crawling out of my skin. Well, that's really something anxiety is meant to do for us in a good way. But when it goes on indefinitely, it starts to wear our body down. And that's where right now, because it's so constant, things like exercise actually become crucial. Because even walking, what that does is that ups your system, but then it actually naturally helps your system settle back down after you exercise. Things like Hannah's talking about, like when your mind's racing. If your mind's racing, like you're laying in bed at night, two things you can do that are very simple are deep breathing, where you breathe in for 5 seconds into your diaphragm, so you're making your stomach get bigger, not your chest. Hold it for 5 seconds and then slowly blow out. That actually, again, slowly brings down your system that's really jacked up too high. Things like when you have racing thoughts, doing mental math, where you add and subtract in your head, just simple numbers. Like you can say, if your thoughts are racing, let me subtract backwards by sevens, because that's a little bit hard. Where you do mental math is also where is the same part of your brain that obsessively thinks. So that can actually interrupt that temporarily. What you don't want to do is one of the reasons why people who smoke cigarettes say it relaxes me is because cigarettes artificially push your system real high up. It constricts your lungs, it makes your heart beat faster. So when you come down from that artificial thing, you feel more relaxed, but it's actually destructively jacking your system up. So yeah, Hannah, right now, that is so present for everybody that things like caffeine you have to watch out for. You know, eating healthy becomes much more important because it helps stabilize your system. And just even breathing well, because we're all more stressed out, so we're breathing more shallowly and we don't even know it. So those just that physiological part of anxiety. I always say the salt in the wounds of anxiety is you can be depressed for a long time and not have physical symptoms, but anxiety immediately has physical symptoms. So even when a little kid says, I have butterflies in my stomach, that's a physiological symptom. So sometimes you have to notice those. If your throat's getting tight, your neck's getting tight, your arms are going numb, you're getting headaches, you have to go, oh, that right now is most likely anxiety.
Great tips there. You've touched on this so many times, and I see a couple of the people who are on the call right now are actually sitting near windows. Miss Cassandra is sitting outside. I'm looking at some of the photos. Being outside and the importance of sunlight, I feel like I've mastered the 10-minute walk, not the 10-minute jazzercise, but just a simple walk. Does that really work? Is that really good for you?
Oh, absolutely. You know, they say right now, just even before COVID, they say that sitting, because we sit so much at work, is the new smoking. You know, that you really should not be sitting down for more than a half an hour at a time. And so actually, even if you just get up and walk across your office or walk and get a glass of water, that's good. So yes, a 10-minute walk throughout the day, multiple times, is great. They just released a study last week that people who walk live longer, and it doesn't matter how vigorously you walk, as long as you're walking about a half an hour a day or an hour a day. And so, that becomes super important. I think being outside in nature is huge because nature hasn't changed during all this. And I think when you're looking for some stabilizing factors in your life, like I was walking through a neighborhood the other day and I thought, look at how beautiful it is. Nature doesn't even know what's going on. and so looking at trees that have been there that haven't changed, things like that give us some sense of continuity and solidness, become very important.
Have you seen an increase in your patients of people that truly are, maybe even for the first time, really scared of death? That, people are scared of a lot of things. Has that reared its ugly head?
Well, I would definitely say this. What I see, especially in a place like Hilton Head, where a lot of the people have tended to be somewhat successful in their lives, what's really hard for that group of people is the lack of control. Right? There's nothing they can do to end this. There's nothing they can do to make sure. So they tend to go towards, almost obsessive measures of control or frustration that they can't get to control, or they want other people to think like they do. They start thinking other people are stupid if they think differently. Definitely the issue of, it's interesting. Death isn't so much as, I would say, that lack of control. People have brought up death. But it's not what I think people are scared of with the virus. I hear less people being afraid of dying from the virus than just getting it. That sense of being one of the people that get it. So I think what people are looking at more is everything just feels out of their control. And that's a great, actually a great thing is focusing very clearly on what you do control and putting your energy into that.
Michelle, back to the programs that NAMI has, do you see more of inside of your programs, or do you have programs more for the person affected or for the caregivers of those affected? Because they both are in the discussion, or need to be in the discussion.
I would say that the need is equal, because but they have to be addressed differently. And I think that the people who are caring for people who have, mental health conditions are managing a lot of things, maybe externally, as well as internally, but, managing jobs, managing all of the responsibilities. And I think that people who struggle with illness, which, everybody has something. I have my things, PTSD, things like that. And I think that what Dr. Ward said about it, you have to manage that on a daily basis. But then when there's a crisis happening, if you've got the experience in crisis, then there's a tool set and a certain procedure that you go to. And I'll tell people all the time, this is what we can do with mental health. We don't have to wait till the crisis happens. In the same way that a hurricane comes, we don't have to run out and grab toilet paper or grab water and do all that stuff at the last minute. We can have procedures based on the level of crisis that we have. And so when there's a time to talk about things, and there's a time to just comfort and be there and not say anything. What I find that NAMI has done for me in my own personal experiences I went through as a family member. How I became a participant in NAMI is in 2012. I had a severe family crisis, and I went to the Family to Family program. Now, I'll preface that we have two systems of programs in NAMI. We have the support programs, and then we have the education programs. Family to Family used to be 12 weeks. Now it's down to 8 weeks, and we're doing some virtually. It's a trauma-based teaching program that teaches skills to family members who are caring for family members. And keep in mind, all of this is free. So you'll sign up. We do these about twice a year. I'd love to do them more often, but we just don't have the facilitators available. We're working on that. So the course is such that we, first of all, teach somebody how to put a crisis file together. So when that crisis comes, you know who to call and what to do, and that you've got all the information readily available, just as if your house was on fire, that file to grab out as you're walking out the door. The other things that we teach are problem solving, communication skills. So that's our educational program. I'm going to tell you, it saved me. And I became then, at the end of that program, a facilitator, and then became more involved in that aspect. But we have core programs to teach people who are recovering from a mental health condition. Maybe they've had a mental health break or a mental break and they've been hospitalized. Well, that's where NAMI Connections and peer-to-peer, those are the peer-to-peer program is the education program for that. And then the NAMI Connections is where then people go for those support group meetings every week. So your question was, which is most prevalent? They're mutually important because one holds the hand of the other.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And to think these are free programs, my goodness. Another question for Dr. Ward. Relationship, I know you do a lot of counseling for marriage and family and children. What are some of the issues that you're seeing within marriages, within parenting relationships right now that you can kind of give some tips on getting through this and to the other side?
One thing I would say just immediately is just the shift in lifestyle, where people tended to be working or out and about. And then the shift of everyone has to be together, hunker down, kids' activities stopped, maybe friendships had to be limited, all those things. So there was just initially this huge shift. I mean, I really had parents saying to me, what do I do with a 3-year-old all day? They had never done that. So there's just a shift in how we live our daily lives. And that I would say most people at least have come to terms with that at this point, but initially that was a huge issue. And then, it's kind of logical that any difficulty or weakness that was there before is just getting exacerbated in this situation. So if you had some parenting issues with a teenager, when you're shut in the house with them and everybody feels edgy, those get worse. If there were marital problems before or people in the middle of divorces, the tension just gets higher because you've just upped your uncertainty level. So to me, what becomes very important is that you realize, I always say, like, you live in like kind of an emergency zone. Like I would say April and May, you just say, this is a different time of our lives. And what we do is say, we're not going to solve the big problems today, right? We're not going to go after the big issue today. What we're going to do is calm our whole life down, structure it, say, okay, here's what our week's going to be like. And, you give each other a lot of mercy and grace and understand everybody's over this, and then just keep it super simple. Keep it, it's health, it's sleep, it's eating, it's enjoyment of the day, it's basic tasks and rules, and feel like, okay, if we get those done well, or well enough, we've done well today. I think the biggest two issues in families and relationships are, thinking about how you feel so you don't make your decisions blindly based off that. So if you are frustrated, you just don't take it out on your kids. If you are edgy and tired, you just don't start screaming at your spouse. And then I would just also say, again, the other thing is substance abuse. So many people are drinking more. I mean, we're seeing in our office, they're recording it in sales, using substances to kind of make it through this. And unfortunately, almost every call made to like police officers for domestic abuse involves alcohol. And so if you're going to drink or smoke pot or whatever, you really have to think about, this is a very inflammatory time to do that. So you have to keep it well under control. And use other things, do something else first. Go for a family walk first. So yeah, it really becomes about slowing everything down, being glad for what's good, and then noticing patterns that are not working well.
One last question. In getting reopened and businesses reopening, friends' homes reopening to get-togethers, kids' activities begin again, a lot of that is probably going to be done, and it's already so strange with masks on and continuing to social distance or not being able to give someone a hug. Our churches, our neighborhoods, do you anticipate a different feel, and how can we embrace that? I'm a Southern girl. Like, it's going to be tough for me not to just grab people and hug them moving forward in our businesses and workplace without making another person seem like you could have the virus, or I don't want you to make me sick. Ooh, it's a really strange place for us to be in as kind humans to one another.
Yes. here's my guess, and this is a very uninformed guess, so everybody take this with a grain of salt. From what I'm seeing already, people are following those rules on their own terms, right? Nobody, it is not a set way. Everybody's following them even now. I'll just say I worked with someone a couple weeks ago who went on a blind date. So I'll just, that's where people, right, exactly. So, so what I would say is this. I think initially, the first couple weeks that we start to reopen, it's going to be well understood that everyone's going to be cautious, And then I think as more statistics come in and we understand the nature of how this virus affects different age groups, which it does, I think it's going to start getting clearer about who's going to have to isolate more, who just for safety's sake is going to do that. My take on it is after the first month that we reopen stuff, there are going to be a number of people who just go back to what they always did. I think if they don't think they're in the danger zone, I always say the way people should kind of look, the model they should look at a little bit for this is polio. That in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, they would have polio outbreaks in the summer. My dad told me that, they would say, okay, nobody go to the public pool because a child had polio. And that was a disease that affected children, right? Which really gets people upset. And still, we didn't stop long-term shaking hands. Still, we didn't stop going to ball games. And so that press of humanity to live in community is something that is, and I think it's going to cause a lot of initial stress and conflict between people. Like, why are you doing that? Why aren't you wearing a mask? And so, but I think initially the first 3 or 4 weeks, everybody's going to say, yeah, and then I think what we're going to see is people who take it very seriously, do wear the mask, do the gloves. And then I think there's going to be people who go right back to their normal lives. Yeah. If you don't think you're high risk, I think, and you're not around anyone high risk, I think by the middle of the summer, unless there's another outbreak, a lot of people will act that way.
All right. Dr. Rachel Ward and Michelle Casey from NAMI, thank you guys so much for joining us today. I hope that this has been helpful. I know I've certainly enjoyed the conversation, and I feel a little bit more at peace today than exactly, and I hope others do as well. I hope everybody has a wonderful day. Stay safe and stay healthy, and we will see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.